January 12, 1945. One of the fiercest offensives of the Second World War has just started on the Eastern Front. In it, more than 2 million soldiers of the Red Army, they are thrown on a German army that is totally crushed, and that little or nothing can do to contain the Soviet onslaught. This operation was known as the Oder-Vistula Offensive, which ended with Stalin's troops less than 70 kilometers from Berlin at the end of January 1945. This was the first time that the Red Army soldiers set foot in within the original border of the Third Reich, and for the first time, panic gripped the German population. It is estimated that between 8 to 10 million German civilians made a desperate flight in the direction of Berlin in order to escape the Soviet soldiers. This flight was totally disorganized and with temperatures that reached 20 degrees below zero. Many of them died from cold, hunger, exhaustion, or bombardment. Most of those left behind also did so at the hands of Soviet troops, who the moment they set foot in East Prussia, exploded into an irrepressible thirst for blood and revenge. Without going into all the crimes and atrocities that took place here, which we will see soon in a live program, we are going to analyze the reaction of the soldiers of the Red Army when they came across German society and its way of life. This that we are going to see next, without a doubt, is one of the greatest paradoxes of those times, which has gone quite unnoticed. It all started when the front-line troops were arriving on German soil. Suddenly, they began to realize that urbanism was quite different. They had been told for years that the Soviet Union represented a paradise for the peasantry and the worker. Once they began to see the houses in the area, which were large, well-kept, and mostly had beautiful gardens, the Soviets believed that they were the houses of wealthy German barons. They quickly began to destroy and burn them, also destroying everything they found inside. Little by little they realized that there could not be so many barons in Germany, since the vast majority of houses they encountered had these characteristics. However, this did not stop the destruction from stopping. Everything was ablaze in East Prussia, to such an extent that when night fell, the soldiers hardly had anywhere to go to shelter from the cold. Later it was learned that in addition to the hatred they felt for the Germans, this destruction was also motivated so that the Soviet rearguard troops, as well as their senior officers, could not grab or take possession of anything when they reached their positions. They called them the vermin of the general staff and the vermin of the rear. Although in their countries, most of the houses were made of wood, there all the houses were of brick and stone, with a garden full of well-pruned hedges and with excellent roads throughout the area. The Soviets were also surprised by the large number of pianos they found in practically every house, and by the presence of radio sets in abundance. All these elements were provoking more and more a mixture of envy, bewilderment, anger, and admiration towards the Germans, which could hardly be controlled. They also felt cheated by their own leaders, realizing that many issues they had been told were a lie. However, due to the feeling of revenge they felt towards the Germans, it was quickly redirected to them. The question that many soldiers of the Red Army asked themselves, as they recorded in writing, was, for what reason did these Germans who live so well invade us, if in our country compared to theirs, there is only misery? A Soviet soldier noted, "How are we going to treat these Germans? They do not lack anything, they are well fed, they have good houses and livestock. They have orchards with apple trees, and they come and invade us. They even reached my city, more than 1,000 kilometers from here. For that alone, Captain, we should strangle them all." As expected, the ideological department of the Soviet Army soon paid attention to the different reports of the postal censors, which warned that the soldiers were writing many letters to their families, in which they told them this contrast in the standard of living. While these soldiers did not do so with malicious intent, it was clear that this information when they got home could have an incorrect political interpretation. This made the postal censorship departments have to work overtime to hide all this information that the soldiers were writing in their letters. As an anecdote, here we have to include that due to the lack of paper that the soldiers had, They resorted to papers and postcards that they took from German houses, carrying many of these folios. Anti-communist slogans that the Germans had. This caused that the Soviet High Command made an effort to send paper to the soldiers to write, and that situations of this type did not occur again. Another fundamental aspect of this episode was the reaction that the Soviet authorities had with the prisoners from their state that they were releasing. These numbered in the millions and had been falling under German control during their advance in 1941 and 1942. This group of Soviets who found themselves in German territory was very heterogeneous. There were forced laborers, prisoners of war, and lastly, Soviets fighting on the German side. In addition to this group that fought with the Germans, most of whom were shot on the spot, the other two were not spared numerous punishments either. There are testimonies of many of them that describe that the German treatment had been very hard, but the one that their own compatriots gave them now was even worse. They were accused of traitors, deserters, collaborators and along etc. Some men who could fight were incorporated into the Red Army to launch them in the last offensive towards Berlin, but despite this, after the battle, they were again arrested and interrogated, many of them being sent to concentration camps, along with the soldiers who had already been sent after being accused of traitors. The Soviet women who were captives were also subjected to a treatment quite similar to that of the Germans themselves, with what this implies. On the other hand, the situation for the Germans at this time was the most critical they had experienced in the entire war. For the first time, waves of millions of people were heading towards the interior of its borders in a desperate way. With them they brought a few material belongings and their heartbreaking testimonies. Although many German defeats had been hidden from its population, as is customary for all countries when things are not going well, this catastrophe could not be contained. Although the news reported that the fighting was taking place in the Warsaw surroundings, the reality was that the front line had been completely bypassed in the first days of the offensive. The Soviet armored columns advanced tens of kilometers a day towards Berlin, without anything being able to stop them. Once these refugees began to arrive, and with them the stories of the great atrocities that the Soviets were committing on children, youth, adults and the elderly, as well as all their property, this catastrophe had to be made public. There was no choice but to spread these stories officially, and make the population understand the fate that awaited them if they were not able to overcome the situation. Either he fought, with the risk of dying, or he would surely die once the Soviets captured him if he surrendered. In a similar way to what Stalin did in the summer of 1942 with his famous Order No. 227, entitled with the phrase "Not one step back," Himmler, who had been appointed commander of the Vistula Army Group, had to give an order identical to the German troops. This order was called Death and Punishment of Those Who Do Not Do Their Duty. Finally, after suffering huge military and civilian losses, the Germans were able to consolidate a more or less stable front at the height of the Oder River by mid-February, awaiting the final Soviet onslaught. Well, so far this program, in which we have seen what this first culture clash meant in the Soviet soldiers who arrived in Germany. If you want to see the complete military development of this offensive, I will leave you this program in the description, in which we analyzed it a few months ago. I await your comments on the matter, with the opinion that this matter deserves. This is it. Subscribe and support this channel if you like this program, and see you in the next one. See you soon.